Alrighty, everybody. I will call us back into order for the public session of our meeting. We've already been called to order and begun with the invocation and pledge of allegiance and had an executive session this morning to discuss a personnel matter. But we now come back into public session, and we do have a time for public participation in the hearing, but had no speakers sign up, and so I'll move on to our reports and communication. Had no city councilors that wish to give a specific report, and so I'll move on quickly to my report and make that brief, just in the interest of time. At this time, I'd like to ask the members of American Legion Post 25 to gather in front of us. And we won't take offense if you want to turn around and face everybody else. This fine group of individuals can be seen just about every weekend in Lawrence. They put up their tent at just about every public event that we have. They help out. Recently, they've assisted the police with traffic control when it comes to things like parades. They volunteer to clean up abandoned cemetery sites. They are go-getters, and they are veterans. These veterans served their nation honorably in our armed forces, but they realized that their service didn't end when they were discharged and came back to the United States. And they've continued their service to our city. They realized that they serve important roles in teaching the next generation what it means to be a servant leader and to grow affection for their own organization, not by just simply doing things for themselves, but by doing things for others. And one of the most incredible things that they did recently was to work with Lawrence District 55 and Lawrence Academy to gather a huge number of toys. They also worked with a local business, Palmetto Brothers Dispensary, and gathered toys and funds. They donated a check to our city toy fund, Christmas for Kids drive, in the amount of $1,000. I think that is worthy of our city's recognition and appreciation and thanks. And so at this time, I would like to present to them this certificate of appreciation, which members of City Council have signed. Please give them a hand. Certificate reads, with great pride and gratitude, this certificate of appreciation for citizenship and community leadership is presented to American Legion Post 25 in recognition of their outstanding efforts to improve the city of Lawrence, serve as role models of good citizenship and civic leadership, and to provide for those in need, both during the Christmas season and all throughout.
So good. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Mayor, just as post commander and mayor and the city council, thank you so much for the recognition. We appreciate that. To the veterans, the mayor already kind of hit that on the head. The veterans work us with a mission. Our mission is to here in the community is to the financial way affect us to be a force for good in the community. That means whatever project you're working on, we want to try to help you make that better. We don't have our own agenda. We use your agenda to get the time. We want to be part of the community. We're just an organized group of that. 5 of us here that are obviously retired last month. We're about 120 strong within our actual organization. you very much. I guess we do have a mission. We are strongly starting to establish a veterans home, a veterans post to the community. Meeting place for the goals. We're working on that. I think we appreciate the conversation. Thank you very much for your
Thank you all. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Merry Christmas. Thank you all. Thank you so much. That is so good. Very well deserved.
There are things that I do on my own from time to time, but I think it's important to note that City Council acted as a body to recognize the American Legion. Thank you. Alrighty. The City of Lawrence is growing. I don't want to sound like a broken record by saying that, but we just continue to have good news. And our focus is on growing well and thoughtfully, making sure that we make wise decisions now that will affect us down the road. Maintaining quality of life for all of our residents. And to that end, having sound leadership is a key part of that. And we have been in the process of selecting our next city administrator, not to replace Gary Coleman, but to succeed Gary Coleman. And so we look forward to continuing that process after we adjourn with our formal, before we adjourn, after we conclude our formal business, council will go back into executive session for further discussion on that matter. But I do want to say this publicly. Though I will work very closely with our next city administrator, it is City Council's duty under our laws to hire the next city administrator and make that choice. And so I appreciate the thoughtful manner in which City Council has sought to go about that process and to be involved in that process. Tonight, or old habits, this afternoon, we will consider a number of matters that contribute to growth. We will consider a business license, which brings us into compliance with state law requirements and standardizes that process in the City of Lawrence. We will consider annexing new property into the city, annexing new property that is intended to bring a new retail dining establishment. And we will amend, subject to the will of council, we plan to amend our ordinance approving the sale of property to SK Builders, which will allow that project to advance. All of these things are things that the City of Lawrence is doing as a government to respond to our needs now and to grow wisely. And it's important that we remain forward-thinking, that we have city officials and city staff that are committed to the overall vision of not just growing, but growing well. And I look forward to the business that we'll do here at the end of the year to further that goal. Because I do anticipate that this is our last meeting of the year, because this is the last time I'll get to deliver one of these reports, I do want to take just a moment to say thank you. First, I want to say thank you. If I take personal privilege to my Lord, who I hope guides my actions and who leads me when I'm listening to do what's right and in the best interest of the city. I want to take time to say thank you to my fellow members of City Council. And though we have spirited discussion from time to time, we don't really ever have contentious discussion. And as a body, we work well together. That's something a lot of other cities can't say. Not pointing fingers, just that's a fact. It's a pleasure to serve on council with you. I want to say thank you to Gary once again for your service for the past 11 years to the city of Lawrence. I want to say thank you to all the members, the 85 members of Lawrence City staff. Part of our discussions with our candidates to be the next city administrator is who will work to maintain the culture that we have here, who will act as a friend and a colleague, so that we look at each other, continue to look at each other as the family that we are. There are jobs that pay more money, maybe few that are more rewarding, but we have each other's backs, and we look out for each other. And I appreciate the 85 employees that it takes to build that culture. I especially thank our department heads, who have my back, who work day by day to do what's in the best interest of the city, who don't work normal office hours, but whenever you need something are there and willing and ready to do it. The public doesn't see what you do. There's so much that we do that people could assume just happens. It doesn't happen. It takes an awful lot of work, and none of you get the thanks that you deserve. But while I have the floor, I want to say thank you. And finally, I want to thank the citizens of the city of Lawrence. We are a blessed community. We are a community where other people come and they notice how friendly we are to each other. We've been through some really trying times. I've earned a few more gray hairs than I had. But on the whole, there's one or two that cause a little bit more trouble than the rest. But on the whole, we're a community that stands together. And as we face another Christmas with COVID still on the horizon, it's important to remember that we're not out of the woods yet. We still need to have each other's backs. We still need to do what we need to do to look after each other and our own health. I urge people to be responsible and to love one another. I'm a very grateful mayor, and if I didn't take time to say it throughout the year as often as I should, to all of you, everybody that I mentioned, I just want to say I'm very, very thankful. Appreciate it. Alrighty. Moving on to the next item on our agenda, council business. We have a consent agenda which includes approval of minutes from our meeting of November 16th and our agenda for today. Do I hear a motion?
Make a motion, we accept the consent agenda as printed.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, no. And the consent agenda is approved. Thank you, council. Moving on to the first item of old business, we have second reading of ordinance 11-21-01, which is our business license ordinance, revising it to bring it into compliance with state law. This is something that you all would have heard about at the Municipal Association and we have discussed previously, so I don't think it should be new to you, but I would ask so that we come into compliance by the statutory deadline that we pass this today. All those, do I hear a motion to approve ordinance 11-21-01?
I make a motion.
We have a motion from Council Miller. Is there a second?
Second.
We have a second from Council Lattimore. Is there any discussion? All right, hearing none, I call the question. All those in favor of passage of ordinance 11-21-01 on second reading, please indicate by saying aye. Any opposed, no. And the measure is passed unanimously. All right, moving on to new business. I'd like to present first reading of ordinance 12-21-01, which is an ordinance to annex 914 East Main Street into the territorial limits of Lawrence, South Carolina. As I said, this annexation is for the purpose of bringing in a retail restaurant business, and so it would be appropriately zoned B4. This is being brought to the city by way of 100% petition from the owners. By the way, it also helps us sort of close one of those donut holes that has persisted out on East Main, so that's very helpful. And it has the added benefit of being able to generate additional hospitality tax revenue depending on the business which eventually locates there. Do I hear any motions concerning ordinance 12-2101?
Make a motion, we approve ordinance 12-21-01 for sure.
We have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion?
This is
Yes.
This is the Gwynn Siding property.
Correct. This is the old Gwynn Siding location on 76. Gwynn Siding location?
Just a fact.
Any further questions or discussion? Alrighty, hearing none, I call the question. All those in favor of passage of ordinance 12-21-01 to annex 914 East Main Street into the city of Lawrence, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, no. And we have passed that on first reading. Thank you, council. Moving on to the last item of official business before us on the agenda today is an ordinance which would amend the ordinance we previously passed, I believe in November of 20. Which would permit the sale of property currently owned by the city to SK Builders. The reason for this amendment to that ordinance being brought to council is that while the actual closing is affected by the mayor or the city administrator on behalf of the city, sale of property belonging to the city must be approved by city council. And after we passed the original version of this ordinance, which set out the 66 acres on the north side of the ridge between the ridge and Fleming Street extension, extensive civil engineering surveys were done, and due to the lay of the land, basically, we believe it would be better and in the interest of the city in encouraging a successful neighborhood to be built out, to change the designation of what land would be sold. And so there's essentially a gully or ravine which sort of runs down diagonally from the northeast corner to the southwest corner, more or less. And what this ordinance does is take the land that would be on the north side of that, and it would remain in the city's hands, and the land that would be on the south side of that would be sold, but we would add to that a portion of the tract which is currently included with the ridge property to the east. As you will recall, there was already a discussion as part of that previous ordinance to allow vehicular access by way of an easement or a road to be built across this property to the portion of the land that was to be sold. But given those engineering difficulties and costs, and given the need to have homes sort of built closer to Exchange Drive, we're asking that this additional land be sold, and we have added to the purchase price an additional $150,000 to account for that extra land. So that's sort of what we're dealing with here and the reasoning behind it. Do I hear any motions regarding Ordinance 12-2102? Alrighty. We have a motion. Is there a second? We have a motion and a second. Councilor Miller, what discussion do we have? Alrighty. If you'll see attached to the ordinance, the portion on the northern end of the map, labeled Tract 1, has what appears to be sort of a stream, and then there's housing lots laid out to the south of that. It would have been what we originally designated for sale was just this northern portion. What we're doing is we're asking council to add this additional acreage here on the south. Correct. 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 And the northern portion would remain in city hands. The plan for the neighborhood would be before council at another time, as I understand, because that would need to come through the planning commission. But But all we're simply voting on here is whether or not we amend the ordinance to add that additional acreage and subtract the northern portion. No, ma'am, I don't believe any work, clearing work has been done because there's been no closing on the property.
Just for clarification, there'll be further discussion later on with the planning commission and all that about, traffic, possible turn lane, something we can do, because this is an area that could be a real problem, that we don't want to let that get by us. This is just conveying the property, but later on we'll be able to talk about that, or at least get planning commission involved in that.
That's correct. Yeah, I would anticipate that the planning commission would recommend that if this design were approved, that it would be approved subject to a traffic study, and that anything that would be implemented there or would be suggested there would be implemented. But that's sort of another discussion for another day.
As this is printed, this is not approved. This is not the approved neighborhood yet. We're just talking about the property.
Just the boundaries of the property.
Just
Correct.
the boundaries of the property, not the layout of the property.
Correct. Correct. Yes, that's important clarification for the record. Thank you.
There's been more people asking questions about it as well. Well, they should have.
Alrighty. Is there any further discussion? All right. Hearing none. All those in favor of passage of ordinance 12-21-02 on first reading, please indicate saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, no. And that is approved. Thank you, council. Okay. That brings us to the end of the matters on our regular council agenda. We have some additional discussion to do, so I'm going to, at this time, welcome City Councilor Johnny Bolt.
Santa Claus.
And at this time, I would entertain a motion to go back into executive session to discuss a personnel matter with the city subject to the recall of the chair.
Second motion.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of going back into executive session indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, no. All righty. Thank you, everybody. You don't have to go home, but you can't stay here.
Have a Merry Christmas.